We will provide all attendees a link to that video after. So welcome everybody. My name is Ujwal. I'm a cultural anthropologist and the co-founder and CEO of MotiveBase. We're here today to study the impact of COVID-19 on consumer culture. First and foremost, let me say right off the bat, we're not going to be going through research that says everybody's buying toilet paper and grocery store shelves are empty and what have you. That's not the purpose of this analysis. I'm sure you've seen plenty of reports that do exactly that already. The purpose of this analysis is to apply an anthropological lens to look at how this event, which has really in many ways come out of nowhere in the grand scheme of cultural events, the real purpose here is to look at how this event is going to shape the future of culture, especially as it pertains to certain aspects of business, certain aspects of our lives. That's really the purpose of this. So we're going to be analyzing, leveraging our technology, MotiveBase, which is a technology that leverages artificial intelligence and big data to perform an anthropological analysis on the things people naturally talk about. So in essence, what we've done here is used technology to do an observational ethnography on the issue of coronavirus or COVID-19. And what we're really trying to understand is how this is starting to impact or reshape or potentially retool certain parts of culture, certain trends, issues that we may have known to exist a certain way that may now change. So that's really the purpose of this webinar. As I said before, my name is Ujwal. For those of you who have just joined in, I'm a cultural anthropologist and the co-founder and CEO of MotiveBase. I'm also an author. My business partner, Jason Partridge, who's also on the line, is also my co-author. We just published our second book called Microcultures. If you get a chance, do check it out because a lot of the concepts we cover here are covered in that book. Okay, so first and foremost, just a quick introduction. Everything you're going to see here today is an ethnographic analysis. It's an anthropological analysis of data which comes in the form of the natural consumer conversations on the internet. We haven't polled anybody. We haven't asked anybody a question. We haven't interrupted anybody. All of this is an analysis of the natural conversations people have on the internet with the focus on getting to or decoding the underlying subtext behind what's being discussed, decoding the underlying meanings, the underlying issues that really drive how people think about this and the impact of obviously the coronavirus on the future of culture. By the way, we do have a massive number of attendees here. So if any of your colleagues do not end up getting into the webinar, don't worry. If they do reach out to you, you can let them know. We will be circulating a copy of the webinar and the video right after to everybody who signed up. Okay, so before we jump into the analysis, I just wanted to give you a quick sense of how we got to it, because this is important. The first problem we had, obviously, looking at the universe of COVID-19 or coronavirus, was to weed out the noise. Our focus, as I mentioned right off the get-go, wasn't on giving you the obvious analysis of people hoarding canned food or toilet paper or what have you, but rather to go beyond the obvious, to look at the broader context of conversations around the coronavirus, to understand how that broader context is impacting issues, trends, topics that aren't so obvious. And we'll come to that in a second. But the goal was to try and understand what those issues were first. What are those early signals of change happening as a result of this massive cultural event, i.e. coronavirus? That was the first issue we had to solve for. The second issue we had to solve for is to then, once we identified what those indirect signals were, to then dive in or double click into those signals to understand how people think about them, what is the subtext behind it, what are the motivations and drivers behind it. And so in order to do this, we applied two of our tools. The first is our signals technology to help us contextually identify the emerging signals. And the second one is our trends technology to then decode the underlying ethnographic DNA behind that signal. Now, there are two parts of our intellectual property that really shape our ability to do this unlike any other technology out there. And it really comes with the underlying purpose of enabling anthropological analysis of consumer conversations. So the two parts of our IP are really this notion of contextual intelligence, and then of course the AI-powered interpretation, which I want to quickly explain, and then we'll start to dive into the results. So first part is the part about contextual intelligence. And this gets applied across all of our technologies, but really crucial in this case, because when we first went to our signals platform, the goal was to figure out, okay, so, imagine that, this central node here is your coronavirus node, right? And it's got all these conversations that are directly related to it. Obviously, all of them, most of them revolve around, health issues and symptoms and, the news media around whatever's being discussed, the stocks tanking and so on. So for all the obvious stuff, which is sort of in these dark circles, our goal was to figure out, okay, what about some of the not so obvious stuff, the indirect relationships, the new entrants that are entering into the cultural universe? How do we identify those new entrants? Our system understands context. And the simple way I can explain that is, imagine that you're on a forum thread somewhere and somebody starts a conversation about the coronavirus, and let's say there are 1,000 responses. Now, obviously in those responses, not everybody is going to use the words coronavirus or COVID-19 or even words like virus. People aren't going to use those words. A lot of times people will talk about things in context, but not necessarily using any of those words. So for example, somebody may talk about how they're feeling really anxious and stressed out. Somebody may talk about fear over their job. Somebody may talk about, what they expect corporations to do in this scenario. The reality is that all these responses are contextual. They're giving meaning to what coronavirus or the culture of coronavirus means and how that's impacting or changing culture as a whole. But of course, if we were a typical big data technology, we would ignore all those responses because they didn't use the words coronavirus or they didn't use the words COVID-19 or what have you. So this is a really important part of our technology, is it understands that, if there are 1,000 responses, it understands that all these responses were in context, even though they don't obviously use those specific words like coronavirus or COVID-19. And that contextual intelligence is crucial because it allows us to then identify topics that are new, that are entering into the topic universe, even though they may be far away in semantic distance. So first of all, we identify the ones that are new. Secondly, we then hone in on the ones amongst the new ones, hone in on the ones that have experienced significant jumps in their semantic score, as in they have gone from being hardly relevant to significantly more relevant in just a span of a couple of months. And then of course, we've looked at other relationships that revolve around those topics, and then those end up being input for our trends platform, where we then decode the subtext behind those microcultures. So signals helps us identify what microcultures are being impacted indirectly by coronavirus, and then trends helps us double click into those microcultures so that we can understand how the meanings around those microcultures are changing because of this massive cultural event. We're able to quantify that change, and then of course talk about the underlying motivational DNA behind it. So that's really what we're going to cover here. And I wanted to give you a quick sense of the rigor behind this, because this is obviously no joke, and it's a difficult piece of analysis to do. And that's why we're excited to take you through the outcomes of what we've already identified. Now, here are the 6 major microcultures that are being indirectly impacted by this massive cultural event that is the coronavirus or COVID-19. And I'll go through each one of these. And they're clustered in a way that indicates the relationships they bear with one another. Corporate responsibility, for example, there's an impact on how people think about the role of corporations thanks to this event. There's an impact on how people think about luxury goods and services thanks to this event. There's an impact on how people now think about mass production of goods and services, and in particular of where the ingredients are sourced or where the specific units or technologies are sourced. Obviously, Chinese sourcing now a concern. We're starting to see concerns about environmental threats, air quality, immune health, which seems a bit more obvious, and then of course, mental wellness. So I'm gonna dive into each one of these now, and we'll start to understand what kind of shift. Now, before I do that, please bear in mind that, you know, we are basically a couple of months into this culture. Already our system has gotten enough data that it's starting to project out the impact of COVID-19 on some of these microcultures. We will actually do a follow-up webinar in 1 month's time, and hopefully all of you can reattend, because our goal there would be to get some more data as this starts to stabilize in the minds of consumers, so that we can now start to understand and establish some more credibility onto the data we already have, to understand, you know, which of these microcultures are continuing to be impacted, you know, which of them are continuing to change, or if there's sort of some of them are hitting the brakes, why is that the case, and so on. So we will do a follow-up webinar and keep tracking this over the next month as well. And of course, one last thing, for the sake of simplicity, we're focusing on US data only here. So we're looking at the American landscape here. We're not looking at Europe or Canada or other nations, just so that's clear. Okay, let's dive into microculture number 1, the changing definition of luxury. So coronavirus is impacting how people think about luxury. And that impact really revolves around consumers almost taking the step back to say, let me think about what luxury should really mean to me in my life. Suddenly there's a refocus on what I can only describe as perishables, you know, sensory experiences, food obviously being central to that. But there's a refocus, or consumers are starting to refocus on sensory experiences over goods as a better definition of what is true luxury. And we can certainly think about how this event has made people take a step back and think about what's important to them in their lives. Now, there's a couple of other things that's important to keep in mind here. Okay, refocus on sensory experiences. Huge focus now on food, and obviously the lack of people's ability to get food is only accelerating that. But there's some requirements emerging out of this. One is this whole discussion about food miles, which really revolves around shortening the length of the supply chain. This obviously has great implications for the food industry, whether it's restaurants or packaged goods. There's something interesting going on there. We're also seeing a resurgence of organics. This is, again, something we'll have to wait and watch for the next month. We're starting to see that. And then another thing we're starting to see is when you go outside of food and outside of perishables, and there is a greater focus on some of the emerging requirements for luxury, with this notion of the focus on the environmental impact of how goods are manufactured, how goods are disposed off of, and so on. All of that now getting added on to the definition of luxury. So we can clearly see how COVID-19 is going to impact the changing notions of what is considered luxury in people's lives. We will do a follow-up on this in a month's time, but we're already starting to see the impact of this on this culture. And again, this was an early signal that signals identified that we were able to then double click into trends with. And that's what you're seeing on your screen. You're seeing some screenshots of the dominant meanings that revolve around the notion of luxury goods in the context of the coronavirus. And now you're seeing how that's impacting how people look at luxury goods itself. Now, here's one thing that is important to take into consideration here. There are a couple of things I've circled on those screenshots. You will notice that the notion of luxury goods is suddenly volatile. Important to note that before, without the context of coronavirus, this volatility didn't exist. Luxury goods was actually something that was growing consistently. People were growing in their interest for luxury goods and all kinds of luxury goods. Now it seems like coronavirus is causing a bit of a break in that consistent growth cycle, and it's slamming the brakes on luxury. And in particular, it's saying, look, there's some requirements around social and environmental issues that we really need to adhere to, and those requirements need to strengthen if we truly have to value the quality of luxury, or value the impact of luxury in our lives. So this is important to keep in mind. Obviously, it has a lot of implications on mid-tier food and beverage, on entertainment, lifestyle brands. Again, the refocus on sensory, and then the refocus on the environmental impact on luxury. That's the two major impacts of COVID-19. Again, not to say that these things didn't exist before, it's now doubling down on. Okay, let's go to the second microculture, which is on the changing culture of immune health. This is an interesting one. You know, we kind of hypothesized, all as anthropologists at MotiveBase, we thought, oh, you know, it's interesting. There's this whole wave of, there was this whole wave of natural cleaning and natural skincare and all this stuff. So maybe we're going to see people take a step back and go, maybe all this natural stuff isn't that good after all, because we're suddenly in a stage where we're using all the chemicals necessary to keep ourselves safe. But that's not the case. In fact, it's the opposite. People are starting to double down because of this. People are doubling down on holistic health. And there are a few reasons for it, which I'm going to get into here. First and foremost, immunity is a key concern, but it's not about pharmacological intervention. It's more about holistic health. And there are two reasons for it. One is the distrust with the medical establishment is only worsening in this situation. It's worsening because of various reasons, and I don't have the time to get into all of them, but it is worsening. And because it's worsening, people are again relying on, you know, I hate to use the word alternative, but the alternative side of the health industry. So they're doubling down on natural health and wellness. And in particular, they're doing this because they want to feel a sense of control over their bodies. They want to feel a sense of control over their health. And this seems to be the only way they're able to do this. So immunity is key, and this notion of strong immune system is really jumping massive growth, both in terms of maturity and in terms of the population size that this is relevant to in culture, and is jumping into the late stages and beyond, into the late majority on the adoption life cycle, which tells us the significance of this cultural event on this notion of holistic health to improve one's natural immunity. So obviously this has massive implications for the health, the wellness industry, even the food and beverage industry, all of which goes into this. Again, we will re-examine this in a month's time, but already we're starting to see an impact of this, which is significant to think about. Now, of course, immunity is also related, as you may have noted from the earlier graph, to some other demand spaces or some other microcultures, and I'll slowly start to get into those. So one such relationship immunity bears is to air quality, where the focus really is on this notion of protecting oneself from environmental threats. And in particular, indoor air quality comes into play because people kind of want to feel like at least inside the comfort of their homes, they are protected and they're doing whatever they can to feel secure. And so that's really the focus here, is on protecting against environmental threats. Now, we talked about air quality, but the interesting thing is everything is about damage limitation, and everything is about feeling empowered and feeling secure through science-led innovation. So this is not about, you know, this is not about, I guess, what you might consider to be alt science in terms of air quality, because there's a lot of that going on in the industry. This is about science-led innovations. This is about using technology to really push the boundaries of how we can keep ourselves and our home environment as clean as possible to minimize the exposure, and this is key, to secondary infections. And I think this is really interesting. It's not like people are saying, oh, you know, I'm going to somehow prevent myself from, you know, getting coronavirus. It's more about, if I do get coronavirus, how do I minimize the situation worsening? How do I minimize secondary infections? And that's really the focus here. Air quality, again, key focus. It's jumping on the adoption curve right into what we call our zone of innovation. So we know through thousands of benchmarking experiments, when a particular idea falls between 33 and 55% on our zone of on our innovation curve, we know it falls in the zone, as in it offers opportunity for mainstream acceptance, and you know, also offers opportunity for a competitive advantage for organizations that are implementing something in that space. So again, we will need to do a re-examination of this in the month's time, because right now we're going through a fairly fairly early stage analysis, because it's really been a couple of months of all of this taking shape, but we're already starting to see this impact and refocus on air quality. Again, people want to feel secure at home and they want innovations. Obviously it has implications for the cleaning industry, because obviously cleaning impacts quality of air, at least from the consumer's perspective. Impacts obviously air purification and other lifestyle, home lifestyle categories. Okay, the next is mental wellness. Another really important microculture that is impacting or being impacted by COVID-19. Here, the focus is, so again, think back to that microculture we talked about strengthening one's immunity. It relates to air quality. It also relates to mental stress and mental wellness. Here, the focus entirely is on the fact that people don't trust pharmacological solutions. People don't trust the medical establishment. They also fear affordability, and they fear that they're not going to get the support they need. Now, the problem is it's kind of like a chicken and an egg scenario. They're afraid of the affordability of healthcare services. That stresses them out. Well, now that they're stressed out and anxious, they're also afraid of being able to afford mental health services. And it's kind of like, you know, there's really no way out. The consumer is stuck in this vicious cycle, and it is only making matters worse. So affordability, a huge problem here, and it's driving a lot of the mental stress and the search for mental wellness. But people don't trust pharma, people don't trust the health establishment, and again, because of that, they're trying to find, as we've seen already, trying to look at holistic health, but they're also trying to look for support with mental health and mental wellness. Obviously, this has massive implications, not just for the wellness and the health-related industry, but also has implications for food and beverage and for organizations when they think about employee benefits programs and things like that, that are geared towards employees during this time. Again, really important demand space. You know, we've seen in culture the focus on mental well-being and mental wellness over the last couple of years in particular. But again, this is being furthered by this massive sort of cultural bomb that's been thrown on all of us in the form of the coronavirus. So again, the immunity is impacting this, but the central focus is on driving mental well-being and wellness. The one thing I will say that's interesting to keep in mind here is that people actually are relating their physical health to their mental health. Now, this wasn't something that was very obvious before the coronavirus happened. So let me elaborate on that for 1 second, because it's an important point. People feel like their physical health isn't as good as it should be, and that's making them anxious. Now, this connection wasn't something that was strong pre-coronavirus. It is now, while we're sort of in this coronavirus phase in culture. So this is something, again, that we will retrack and re-examine a month from now, but it's important to keep in mind. People feel like physically they're not healthy enough, and that's exacerbating the issue. Okay, next we come on to the changing expectations on mass production and environmental responsibility. Another really important microculture being impacted by the coronavirus. So here the development is really on the concerns of mass production, and this is really interesting. Look at words like animals to humans here. You know, words like infect humans. Here's what's happening. The consumer is relating everything back to our obsession as a society with mass production, with getting mass manufacturing of goods and services. And people are seeing the animal to human transmission of disease as a result of our focus on mass production. So everything's being related back now by consumers to our obsession with mass production practices. Now, some of the issues like GMO or genetic technology or agricultural practices are all front and center here, but there's a lot more being discussed here. But I will say that some of these issues are front and center. Obviously has huge implications, again, for the food industry, the beverage industry, and other related industries. But it's just interesting because the realization is that's coming full circle is that we kind of did this to ourselves, right? You reap what you sow, and this fear is causing concern for what else might be in store for us as human beings as we continue with such practices without paying attention to health and environmental problems in the future.
Hey, Ujwal.
Yeah.
It's just Jason here. The good news is that people are so enthralled with the information that's on screen. The bad news is that your pen icon is blocking some of it. So they were just asking if you could move it or minimize it.
No problem. Here we go.
It's actually the toggle. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So thanks for that. And so this is really the key here, and you can see here even at the bottom, even topics like deforestation, antibiotic resistant bacteria infecting human beings, disease spread, pathogens, all of these relate back to the same issue of people saying, we need to re-examine our obsession with mass production. Again, something that was in very early immature stages, right? Early adopter stage, but again, jumping and being pushed further by this cultural bomb of the coronavirus. So massive jump in maturity. And again, obviously this has important implications for sustainability initiatives that we have at the corporate level, for any other initiatives around CR or CSR. Obviously also opens the door to new business models that we may have been considering in the innovation lifecycle. All of this points to some timing issues, right? For example, one of our clients has a really interesting business model that they have been exploring for a year. Now the question becomes, is this the right time for us to actually put this into a test market the moment we start to calm down and come out of this, this mayhem in the next few months, fingers crossed. And so, this really impacts the timing issue of some of those things. But this is starting to change how consumers think about the impact of the issues like mass production. And it is very much linked to environmental issues. Now, again, related to this is another issue, which is corporate responsibility. So let's talk about this. Obviously, very much related to the issue of mass production, but corporate responsibility is an interesting one. And again, driven because people don't trust the government to do its job. People don't trust the regulatory bodies to do its job. And as a result, their desire is to continue to vote with their wallet, right? They want capitalism to take care of this. To put it lightly, the focus is on their favorite companies taking a step beyond what is required of them to take a leadership position on this. Now, related to this, obviously, related to corporate responsibility does come the environment, obviously front and center, right? Companies showing that they're doing more than just following environmental regulations, that they're doing more than just what's required of them to take a leadership position in terms of the impact of their work, their business on the environment and on social issues. Environment, of course, central to that. But the other one that's central to that now is this topic of, for example, overseas suppliers. Again, one of those things that wasn't front and center before is starting to become front and center because of the coronavirus. Again, we will re-examine in a month, but it's showing us that, people look at their motivations and attitudes at the bottom. People want to feel like they're living responsibly. People don't trust the government to do its job. They want the companies that they give their money to go above and beyond what's required of them. So when we look at this, this on the maturity curve, again, the issue of corporate responsibility, very, very tiny, very early stages, but the impact of the coronavirus is pushing this further on that innovation cycle. So it's just really fascinating to see how it's making it more relevant. Again, the consumer is saying corporate responsibility isn't about giving away free stuff during this time, isn't about helping those in need at this time. Those are table stakes. This is about what you do after this time. to change the way you have done things. Again, I think the interesting thing about this is that, oftentimes, especially when we meet people on the corporate responsibility side, oftentimes the focus is so much on the regulatory aspects that those business units don't often think about what the consumer wants. But the reality is that every single part of the business has an impact on what consumers think and has an impact on the brands that people have in market. And what this shows us is that there's business value in innovating in some of these areas. What we need to figure out, obviously, in the next couple of months is how much of this is really accelerating because of the coronavirus, and obviously how long the coronavirus issue lasts in culture will affect that. So again, we'll come back to that in the next month and maybe a month after that. And so that's it. That covers the major demand spaces that I wanted to take you through. Not bad. I'm pretty much on time. It's 1:32 Eastern. We can open the floor for some questions. Obviously, a quick shameless plug. Do check out Microcultures if you can. It's available on Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. I do say that because if most of you are at home at the moment, you may have some time on your hands to check it out. It's a quick read, but it will put a lot of what we're talking about into perspective in terms of understanding, culturally understanding microcultures that suddenly develop and pop into a culture that previously didn't exist, and how that can impact the changing role of, or the changing meanings around some of these cultures, and how that affects, the future of certain industries and so on.
Hi, Ujwal. I have one question relating back to our slides that related to wellness.
Yes.
We talked about company benefits and kind of that the role that had in regards to increasing in importance. The question coming back is that given the crisis, did we see anything around people realizing how important benefits like healthcare, especially in a time like this, are? And is there any insight that we had in regards to how that might play out in the days to come?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, it was central to that. And part of the discussions about costs revolved around the out-of-pocket expenses that come in order to seek some of the added benefits. Obviously, depending on what part of the country people are in, people are following slightly different rules around self-isolation and social distancing. But we do think that the moment some of those rules relax, people will start to leverage some of these tools, whether it's going to see a therapist or going to get massages or, looking at physiotherapy or getting back to the gym or whatever that might be. 100%. It is part of the discussion, but the central focus was on how all of this impacts mental wellness and anxiety. Those are the two keywords there. And people want to feel like they don't need to spend money out of or they don't need to get money out of their pockets in order to benefit from their employee benefits programs to address their concerns around mental well-being and wellness.
Excellent. This is something of a related question, but the question is that through this process, did we see anything, or can we provide any insight in regards to consumers' reaction towards the potential impact this may have on employment or future employment?
Yeah, so a great question. The interesting thing is that the reason we didn't put employment here as a microculture in and of itself is that it didn't spike the way these microcultures spiked. Employment is a concern, 100%. It does come into play, but largely people still feel fairly optimistic that they will be okay in the long run. And again, this may be very different a month from now if the infection numbers don't come down or don't start to flatten. This may be very different. So that's why we will examine this again. But yes, employment was a concern, but it did not spike the way these issues did.
Another question, given the fact that this was focused on US data, do we have any insight in regards to how this may be different or similar in other markets, for example, Canada or potentially in Europe?
Yeah, so Canada, I can definitely speak to. We did do a quick scan of that. The main difference with Canada is just obviously the focus on affordability, especially when it comes to immune health, isn't as strong. And you find that Canadians trust the government a lot more than Americans do, and they trust the health establishment a lot more than American consumers do. And so those are the major shifts. We will obviously need to do a deeper dive into that. But all of these demand spaces do show up in Canada. The major difference is just the immune health piece, which is not as oriented towards holistic health as it is in the United States, primarily because of the reasons I mentioned. What was the other market? Was it Europe?
Yes.
Yeah, so we did look at a couple of European markets. We do have data on the UK. We had a quick glance at France. What I can tell you is similar to what I commented on with Canada. You don't see the huge focus on holistic health and immune health the same way you see in the United States. But the other thing I can say is that in Europe, the focus on corporate responsibility and the focus on mass production is significantly stronger than in the United States, where we are seeing a greater set of expectations placed on corporations on some of those areas. But again, we will need to do a deep dive into that. We just had a quick glance at some of that data as we were collating this stuff here. So those are the comments that I can make with confidence.
I have a question here in regards to going into a little bit more detail around culturally tracking these things over time, and what you meant by that with a little bit more description. I think there's just a little bit of clarity that a couple people have asked for around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we have two tools. The tool that you saw all the screenshots from is our trends tool, which is really, once we know what we're tracking, then we can place that into the trends tool and we can dive into that. For example, I know that corporate responsibility is a signal. Now I can double click into that and explore that. But the question you're asking is how we get at those signals. And that's a platform that we actually just launched. It's called Motive-Based Signals. And the focus of that entirely is on helping us understand signals of change. And in particular, let me call them indirect signals. They're signals that are in context, but often they're a hop away. And they don't often show up when you do social media listening or when you do any other type of big data analytics, because they're not directly talked about by consumers in an obvious way. And so that's really what signals allows us to do, is it allows us to look at early topics or issues, or so early signals that are popping into a cultural universe, into a cultural context. And then it tracks that in the context of something else by using semantic scoring and semantic mapping. Now, I'm not going to get into that here. If you're interested, please reach out to me and I'm happy to give you a proper demo and help you understand how we do all that. But the simplest way you can think about that is that, you know, let's take a simple case study. Let's say Jason starts a conversation on coronavirus. I respond to Jason and I talk about, you know, what I expect companies to do. And then somebody else responds to me. And then they go into a specific issue like, I don't know, sourcing from China. Imagine this is a threaded discussion that's happened. Now what's happened, this is a very simplistic example, by the way, but what's happened with person number 3 here is that person number 3 has responded to me and they have responded in the broader context of what Jason was talking about, which is coronavirus, but they haven't used any of those words. But what our system does is it understands that this response from person number 3 was a hop away, but still very much relevant. And so it based on how far away or how many hops away that response is, it is able to assign, quantitatively assign a semantic score to it. And then of course, the more something is talked about with greater frequency, greater volume, and so on, those semantic scores change over time. And over time, we're able to then see, okay, which of these signals are strengthening in their semantic score, as in they're becoming more and more related to the issue of coronavirus, and then how quickly they're strengthening, what is the pace of change, and all of those metrics go along with it. And that's what really allows us to identify those sort of signals of change that aren't obvious, that are still contextual, but not obvious, indirect. And the key for us really is that it allows us to weed past all the noise and really get at the insights that could drive change in a culture.
As a former creative director, I'm dying to answer this question, but I'm not. I'm going to let you answer it from a research standpoint. The question is that in regards to luxury brands, can we provide some insight in regards to how they should be considering how they may want to reshape the narrative in order to be both sensitive and relevant to the current landscape?
Great question. First of all, I mean, to Jason's point, I'm not even going to pretend like I can answer that question with this much analysis. I mean, we need to do a lot more analysis and we need to charge you a lot more money to do that. But before I do that, what I will say is that I think straight away what you can see is that the environmental impact of luxury is going to be an important alibi. This is a word we use a lot. As consumers, we all use alibis as a way to justify our decisions. Doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. And those alibis are critical. What we're seeing here is the alibi of environmentally responsible decision is becoming significantly more relevant to anything luxury. So that's going to be important. So I would say that's a foundational requirement now. And again, we will need to dive more into that to understand that better. And then depending on what kind of luxury solution you offer, whether it's a service, an experience, product, there are other insights here that are relevant. Obviously, if it's a service or an experience, we are seeing people shift or at least start to shift more towards sensorial experiences as a better spend of their money. So again, that has some implications. And then on the other hand, if you sell bags, for example, you know, that this means that this is a threat. And this is an opportunity to think about not just the environmental impact of what you make, but also think about you know, the business model and how to introduce and expand the experience of engaging with your luxury brand beyond just the acquisition of the product. So again, lots of implications that we could easily dive into, but right off the bat, here are a few things that I would say just through the initial research we've done.
Excellent. One of the questions that we're getting is just in the context of kind of the shifts or changes that have happened as a result to our kind of quote unquote normal as far as a daily working life is concerned. Do you have any insight in regards to kind of some of the longer term impacts that may come into play as we think about kind of getting back to a sense of normalcy and getting back to work, quote unquote, in a typical office standpoint? Is there anything in what we've seen that may give line of sight to how we may be rethinking normal in the days to come?
Yeah, a great question. You know, again, I think in the next month we'll learn, but straight away, there are two things that I can point out straight away, right? The first one is this issue of mental wellness. I mean, we already know this as employers. This has become a more and more important issue. You know, employees care about this as they apply for jobs. They care about this once they have jobs, and so on and so forth. So yes, that is, you know, furthering some of the requirements there, expectations there. I think the other piece is going to be this piece about air quality, environmental threats. I think there's some important opportunities here in terms of what we do in the work environment to reduce airborne pathogens and allergens and all of that other stuff that consumers care about. So that's another area where just in terms of the work experience itself and how people feel about being back in work, I think those are important pieces. I think the other piece about this is that as people think about their immune health, I think there's something that, and again, I'm hypothesizing here, just knowing some of the other research we've done in immune health. We'll have to wait and see in the next few months. But one of the things I can tell you is that with immune health, sleep has become a huge issue, and people are really starting to attach that with you know, having better immune health. And so if this starts to get or starts to further in culture, we're going to see greater expectations from consumers about having a bit more of a balance with their work life so that sleep is impacted as little as possible. And I think this will definitely have an impact on people's ability to work from home. I can tell you from other research we've done, people do associate better sleep habits with even having 2 days of work from home in the week. People feel they sleep better when they do that. So I think this will have some larger implications. Again, there's so much more research to be done here, but those three right off the bat, I can see them starting to shape the future of work.
We have a question in regards to our reference to where we talked about how consumers are going to be looking to favorite companies to play a leadership role. We were just asked if we had a bit of a definition around what we mean by favorites. Is that kind of something arbitrary that's being assigned by the consumer, or are there kind of certain kind of markets or areas that are basically being put more pressure put upon them? And then a kind of an add-on to that question is that I think that it would help to also elaborate in the context of the potential backlash that can come with companies not being responsible, i.e. price gouging in kind of the scenario where there's higher demand at grocery stores, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So let me address the latter question first, because that's an easier one to answer, which is that things like price gouging, by the way, do come up in the corporate responsibility banner. We just didn't go through it in the interest of time, but they do come up. So the negative repercussions of that are massive. So companies have to be extremely careful. For example, one of the topics that comes up is the price of toilet paper, where people actually appreciate the fact that the price of toilet paper in their favorite grocery store did not change despite the shortage. So some of these things do come up. And of course, if it did change, it will have a significant impact. Now, how much impact, we will have to, again, wait and see and analyze and dive deep into, but that is important. On the positive side, the definition of favorite is really about the things that the companies and the brands that people are used to buying from. That's what I mean by favorite. Because these kinds of moments in culture are moments where people take a step back and they reevaluate whether the things they buy and the way they consume is right for them, or whether they should start to rethink that. And we don't want people, if we have a loyal customer, obviously we don't want people to rethink whether they should be loyal to us. So that's really what I mean by that is, if you think about your loyal customer base, this is about making sure that you're showing them that you are taking your responsibility as a corporate citizen seriously in the post-COVID-19 world. And what that post-COVID-19 world is going to look like. We're starting to get a sense of it, but again, in the next few months, we'll have a much clearer picture of it as culture starts to evolve.
Excellent. And the last thing that I would like to kind of address is a little bit of elaboration in and around to kind of the conversation that we had around people moving towards experiences over items. The question is in regards to consumers' gravitation towards experiences has been something that has kind of been percolating and rising up across a variety of different categories over time. Can we just clarify a little bit the specificity in regards to how this is playing a role, and also if this is what's happening, whether perceptions will change as a result of Corona? If we could just elaborate on that a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when we looked at the early signal, we saw that signal specifically connect to luxury. It didn't connect to everyday experiences. So now, whether this will also impact everyday experiences or the mass market, we're not sure. That's something we'll need to examine. But on the luxury side, for sure, what we are seeing is the initial sign that people are changing their definition of luxury to say, look, if I have to invest in luxury, then I'd rather invest in an experience than in a product or a solution that that I'm just carrying around, whether it's a shirt I'm wearing or a bag I'm carrying. I'd rather spend the money on a sensorial experience, like an incredible dinner or an incredible experience, whether it's music or art or going to Disney or whatever it might be. I think that's the shift that we're, again, starting to see. We will have to carry this through. Now, the other thing to also point out here is that what we're really seeing here is the definition of luxury, right? So the definition of what is luxury is changing. So what I mean to say by that is, this is not about what is considered luxury by people who are already used to spending in the higher tiers of the marketplace. This is about the overall definition of luxury in culture, which means really what this is going to impact is the everyday consumer, the middle class, the upper middle class, that from time to time, let's call it indulgence in luxury. And what this is showing is that that indulgence in luxury will get a bit of a reconfiguration because of this, because this is making people rethink about what's important to them and what they value in their lives. I hope that helps clarify.
Excellent. No, that's very helpful. There are a series of additional questions that have been asked. I want to acknowledge them, but a number of them are very, very specific to what it looks like is the person's category, and also in regards to pricing and availability. So anybody that has asked those questions, please note that I will follow up one-on-one via email. But much like we like to accelerate and expedite research and deliver kind of insights fast, we also like to run through our webinars fast, meaning there's 10 minutes that I think we should give back to the group, because it doesn't seem like there's any more questions specific to the
analysis here. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, Jason. And everybody, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. We wish you good health and safety, of course. I know it's a tough time, but we appreciate you joining us, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.